Hi, this is Tag again, and today I want to go over another socket and make a roundup of motherboards. Now, today we have the socket 1366, also one of my favorite sockets to overclock. Mainly because there is a bunch of Xeons and it's one of the last sockets where BCLK or FSB overclocking, as it was formerly known, is still something you can do. It's actually, I think, the almost the last socket. The last socket was 1151 when Intel forgot to lock some stuff on Skylake. But that's another thing. Now let's go over the boards manufacturer by manufacturer because unlike 775 there is no different chipsets. It's all X58, which is great. Now let's start with ASRock. Unfortunately, ASRock is useless on 1366. Mainly because of something called slow mode. There is QPI clock on 1366 and ASRock boards, at least the ones I had the ASRock Extreme 3 here. I bought one for testing. It does not have slow mode in BIOS. And it might also not have PCIe clock. Now, one thing you got to know about 1366 is above a certain BCLK, you need slow mode, which basically means I think it's 1-to-1 your QPI to your FSB or something like that. It's really slow in compared to the like 3600 megahertz or something that you would normally run. Uh, and you also need PCIe because to run high BCLK, you want to run your PCIe at 0.45 times your BCLK at least. So let's pull up something like nice little calc here. So let's say you want to run, I don't know, 260, which is already pretty high FSB. Let's do times 0.45. You would need 117 PCIe clock for that, which some boards do, actually most boards do, but not all boards have PCIe clock setting in BIOS. Okay, so that's it for ASRock. Unfortunately, no real point in getting ASRock boards. ASUS. Now let's start with the absolute baseline, the ASUS P6T. This is actually one that I would not get, and I wouldn't get any of the P6T series, or as I'd like to call them, first generation X58, X58 ASUS boards. Now they do have settings you want in BIOS, but they still don't clock very well. So avoid P6Ts, I would say. The first board on this list here that is good or usable, I would say. Now, this is mostly BCLK. Again, some of the P6T, especially the workstation boards and so on, might actually be somewhat decent for like 45 nanometers or i7-920 and uh, stuff like that. I didn't do a lot of testing there, I have to be honest. But let's continue to the P6 X58. X58D. Now, there is not much difference between the premium and the DE. I think there is only the connection between the heat pipe and some minor stuff. Those boards are pretty good. They do high FSB, 270 megahertz plus, no problem. They also do well on Encore, so the Northbridge frequency of the CPU. I had over 5 gigahertz on these boards, no problem. Memory is also okay to good. 1100 megahertz, stuff like that. So 2200 effectively. Triple channel works just fine on these. So if you're you're looking for a non-ROG ASUS board, um, I would definitely recommend the P6 X58 series. Actually, let's see. What is the difference with the Dash E? Those look like first generation boards. Never had one of those then, so recommendation only counts for the P6 X58D. I'm not sure about these, I have no idea. Next up, the Rampage 2 Extreme. This is, I would say, the best board you can actually buy easily. So absolute recommendation for the Rampage 2 Extreme. It does amazing on BCLK. It's actually the best BCLK clocking board out there. So memory is also good in triple channel. There's some single channel quirks we're going to get to later. But triple channel memory is amazing. Encore clock is good. The behavior of the BIOS reset, like recovery after errors, is amazing as well. Basically, only good things about this board. There might be failure of these Fujitsus that fail on the Rampage Extreme someday. To this day, I haven't heard of the problem on Rampage 2. Now, this might be because Fujitsu managed to improve the manufacturing process, or this might be because those are simply newer than the ones on the Rampage Extreme. I'm not sure. So keep that in mind. This might be a thing in the future. Next up, the genes. I'm just going to take the Rampage 2 gene and Rampage 3 gene and throw them in one pot, basically. They are the micro ATX boards. And they're basically not really worth bothering with. They're not terrible. They have all the important adjustments like slow mode and PCIe, so you can overclock on them. They're just not as good as the full size ones. Also because of the VRM. Going to come to that next with the next board. That's already the king of X58. This, if you can get it, is what you want. The Rampage 3 Black. Now, this is definitely the best all-around board, and also the only X58 board that is going to do over 240 megahertz BCLK without slow mode enabled. There's some magic there. I don't know why. It's a really good board. It's super reliable. Error recovery is perfect. It clocks amazing. It actually Rampage 3 Black. If you have a 32 nanometer, so i7 980X, 990X, or if you're actually smart, Xeons, like a W3680, or if you want unlock chips or a lock chip like a 5675, this is the board to run them on. Now on LN2, there's basically, you get at least 100 to 200 megahertz core clock just for free, basically, at the same settings, running on a Rampage 3 Black versus, like, let's say a Rampage 2 or Rampage 2 Extreme or Rampage 3 Extreme or a Gigabyte X58 AOC. So yeah, this board is I sometimes call it the cheater board because it's like if you have the same chip, like same quality of chip like someone else, and you have the black and he doesn't, well, it's free win for you basically. Anyways, if you find one, get one. They are amazing. Now, next up, I would say questionable board. The Rampage 3 Extreme. Now why do I say questionable? Mostly because Rampage 3 Extremes vary a lot, and not in the way you would think. Like, for example, 775 boards, they have boards that clock FSB better or worse. However, with Rampage 3 Extreme, it's more like a change in behavior. Basically, you have boards with perfect error recovery, not losing channels, and then you have boards that just completely freak out once you try to post memory settings that don't work, uh, drop BIOS profiles, stuff like that. Also, it seems they die easier than the other boards. That's just from my experience, but might be just bad luck, honestly. So Rampage 3 Extreme, I would only get one if it was reasonably cheap. Like, for example, Rampage 3 Black, I would say if it costs you 200 euros, pay the 200 euros. Rampage 3 Extreme, definitely don't. Maybe like 80 euros or something like that, less even. So it's really, if you have no other good options, you can get it. Basically, I would personally prefer the Rampage 2 Extreme over the Rampage 3. The next board, the Rampage 3 Formula, is actually better than Rampage Extreme, Rampage 3 Extreme. Now, there's only one weakness with this in the VRM, it's not that great. But these boards are supposedly amazing. I haven't tested it myself because I still couldn't get one of those. They're pretty rare in Europe for some reason. They seem common in like Australia and the US somewhat, but in Europe they're basically rarer than the Rampage 3 Black for some reason. Anyways, supposedly they do very well with 45 nanometers for cold bug, so you can run chips colder than on the other boards with this. Now this is a story I heard, but I heard from someone I trust when talking about X58. So I'm just going to relay that information and hope it wasn't wrong, basically. Let's continue. The Gene, same as I mentioned before. DFI, don't bother with DFI. They look amazing. Let's. Oh, actually, what the hell happened here? Ah, yes, the well-known DFI T-Power X58. Why is that? I don't know. Let's see if it fixes itself. Now we have the full thing. Some dragging around of windows. Drag this over here. Smaller, can you see now? Maybe. Anyways, ASUS Sabertooth. Right, I forgot one. This little military looking board. Now, for a long time I thought this board was garbage, but that was before I started with extreme overclocking. Because these boards for some reason have a habit of having the audio IC die. I don't know why, but I had like 3 or 4 before I started extreme overclocking and they all had audio IC issues. So, but for extreme overclocking, no one cares about audio. And I actually got one from a trash pile from a fellow overclocker because he bought it and the guy sent it without the socket mount here, so he couldn't use it basically. I picked it out of his trash pile, did like almost 280 FSB on that thing. Memory is also decent, however, my board had a damaged socket, so I only could run dual channel, so not sure about that. Encore was also okay, so if you can deal with a board that doesn't have the strongest VRM, so don't run 6 cores on the LM2 on this maybe, but for like, actually don't run high multi 6 cores, I should say. So for like messing around with Xeons, especially lower end ones, something like an i7 920 or so, you can definitely use that one. It's not a perfect board, but it's, if you can get it for cheap price, get it. It's not bad, unlike some of the other boards we're going to now get into. For example, Biostar, whatever this is, don't bother. I never had one, but I've never seen good scores with one either. So they look fancy. So hang them on your wall, don't overclock on them. Next is just stupid microphone thinks I'm not talking. Um, Next is just some OEM stuff. Doesn't matter. DFI also don't bother. They don't have. I think they don't have PCIe. With some of this, I might be spreading false information because I can't remember if they didn't have PCIe or didn't have slow mode. I think with DFI the problem is they don't have PCIe clock. Actually, let's see in the scores if we can figure it out by looking at it. HW bot fast as always. 254, so they should have PCIe. Now it's loading this again. Anyways, DFI, but those are also more pain than it's worth, and also their prices are going to be high because DFI and everyone wants DFI, and so unless you want to hang it on your wall, it's basically a pass from me. They look fancy, and they have this strange plastic that lights up in ultraviolet light, so more fancy than useful. Anyways, let's continue. This doesn't count. This is not X58, but amazing board nonetheless. The classifieds. Now, don't bother with the four-way. It has a bunch of switches on the board. X58 classified four-way. Anyways, this thing has a bunch of PCA slots, and because of that, it has a bunch of is it NF200? I think it's NF200 switch chips, and you can't do good PCIe because of that. Also EVGA because of their own elite tool thing. You have problems setting stuff in ZFSB, and you need ZFSB to set PCIe clock and stuff like that. So they're not good. Also, don't bother with the four-way, I would say. If you want an EVGA board, let's see, where is it? It's not here. Is it this one? I think it should be this one then. The classified 3 is actually decent. HWBot's auto-scaling is the most amazing thing ever. Minimize that. Okay, did I have a score on this? No, I don't. Okay, so Classy 3. I think it's the classified 3. I have one. I don't know which EVGA board it was, but there is a EVGA board that's decent if you're running i7, strictly i7, because the BIOS doesn't support setting the Encore clock on Xeons for some reason. So if you want to run Xeons, don't get EVGA. If you want to run i7s and want to have really good memory and better cold pack than the other boards, get a classified 3 if you can find it. Again, it's again one of those boards where I would say get it if you find it for a reasonable price. Not get it, period, like the Rampage 3 Black, basically. So don't spend 200 euros on that board, please. Continue. The Blood Rage. It's a really interesting board. Other EVGA boards don't bother with the like regular SLI stuff. It's no good. The Blood Rage is a bit of an odd one. It has 3 memory slots. It has a crazy strong VRM. It has all the like hardware features of a good overclocking board. However, from what I heard about it, the BIOS is pretty shit and it also needs mods. I can't remember if it was for PCIe clock or some voltage that you couldn't adjust. I'm not sure about that. I never had that board myself, but um, basically, unless you want something that fights you every step of the way, but can in theory clock well, don't get that one. Continue Gigabyte. No, I have no idea what this is. The G1 boards might be interesting. I don't know. They should be second generation Gigabyte, so it's decent. I think. X58 G1 Sniper. I never had one of those personally, but from the looks of it, this is just a UD X58A UD series board with a green reskin. So from my feeling, those should be decent boards. Don't talk for too long about those. Let's continue. Everything between here and here, you can throw in the garbage. Those are the EX boards, Gigabyte's first generation on X58. Now again, I forgot if it was not having slow mode or not having PCIe on those. But basically something holds you back from doing high FSB on those. Also, the BIOS is pretty unreliable in terms of error recovery and stuff. The boards starting getting good around here, like the UD3R, is okay. Now, stuff I could really recommend from the UD boards are only these two. They're not like UD7 is strong, and UD9 has some. Let's pull up a picture. Actually, I still have this one. Now, there we are. UD7 and UD9 are basically the same board, except for some really fancy stuff. I mean, same board in terms of VRM and stuff like that. This one has more PCIe. But the UD9 also has extreme overclocking BIOS from back in the day, where you can basically select which core you disable, and it's also supposedly better on Uncore. So it's another one of those I unfortunately couldn't test myself so far. But UD7 is definitely a board that's worth getting if you can find one relatively cheap. I would say, other than the X58 AOC and the UD9, it's the best Gigabyte board, definitely. UD3R, if you find it for cheap, get one. It's not terrible. Like all of the A boards, the second generation Gigabyte, they have decent enough BIOS, decent enough VRMs. Even the UD3R has a okay VRM. Now UD7 and UD9 have complete overkill VRMs. They're one of the only few boards besides the Black and the X58 AOC where I would actually trust them to run, like reliably run for multiple sessions, long sessions on LN2, 6 cores, all core load, stuff like that. Anyways, let's get to Gigabyte's best board, I would say, the X58 AOC. This orange thing is a little bit of a legend, but unfortunately it's not as magic as the Rampage 3 Black. However, definitely a good board to have. This one also has some interesting quirks. For example, there is I would say, I don't know if it's intentional or if it's bugged. There's basically a bug BIOS where you can run the Uncore at less than like you can run the memory more than twice as fast as the Uncore. So basically you can set really low Uncore, run only a stick of memory in the inner channel and boot some absolutely ridiculous speeds. Like, I don't know, 3200 megahertz or something like that. Ground is the expert in abusing memory in X58. I'm not that sure, but anyways, for memory OC, even with like regular stuff, as long as you keep it in the inner two channels, this board is amazing. Even with the outer channels, it's still not bad. Unfortunately, in my experience, there's some sort of bug with this thing, losing memory channels in triple channel if you run more than 1.4-ish volts uncore voltage or QPI volts, whatever you want to call it. Which is really annoying because you can't do high North bridge with high memory on this like you can on the ASUS boards. But besides that, there's another feature that makes this unique. It has, let's zoom in on this. It has these buttons up here. These buttons enable you to change the multiplier in OS with lock chips in X1 steps, with unlocked chips. With lock chips, you can set them to the maximum the chip can do with pressing the plus button, which is very useful both for locked and unlocked, and it can also adjust the FSB with those buttons without opening ZFSB, which is also amazing. Now, unfortunately, it can't adjust the PCIe without ZFSB, but you can adjust it with ZFSB, unless like EVGA boards where it would crash the system if you tried to set the PCIe on ZFSB. Also, this board can usually boot 120 megahertz PCIe compared to the 118 usually ASUS can do. It can actually do more in some cases, but it drops SATA drives. Now, on the ASUS boards, it doesn't post anymore. This just drops SATA. So for high BCLK, let's say easy high BCLK, I would say this is either the best or the second best board next to the Rampage 2 Extreme. Anyways, definite recommendation from my side. Get it if you see it. It is fun. It has some Gigabyte quirks, but it has way less terrible behavior than most Gigabyte boards. There's actually, I have bought a new one recently because it was super cheap, like 80 euros or something, with a Xeon something and 16 gigs of RAM, or was it 12 gigs? Anyways, I just bought it because it was cheap, and like with the Rampage 3 Extreme, unfortunately some of these have weird behavior and some of them don't. And it's not like weird behavior you can fix by just flashing a new BIOS, unfortunately. So maybe if yours behaves really weird and you think Tech told me bullshit and Gigabyte X58 AOC is the worst board ever, maybe you just got a bad sample, or you haven't got the newest BIOS. There's also a unreleased BIOS for this that is better than the other ones. Anyways, let's continue. I don't think we have too many more to go. OEM garbage, don't bother. Hunansai, I don't get the China boards, therefore they're useless for overclocking. Intel boards, also don't bother. Even the SO2, I think, is the second revision. It's still garbage. Yeah, that's the second revision. The first one has the sideways memory slots, but anyways, don't bother with Intel. MSI. MSI is a bit of a strange case on X58. I would say they are useless, but I've seen scores with really good FSB on MSI, and personally I could never reproduce them, so either MSI doesn't like me, but anyways, I definitely don't like MSI. Anyway, so pull up, I think this was the ultimate budget board back in the day, basically, when X58 Xeons first became a big thing. So like the used Xeons from the retired servers entered the market. Those things were everywhere, and everyone was using those MSI boards. However, for overclocking, for once they have not that strong of a VRM. You see it here, 5-phase VRM. Uh, I wouldn't recommend getting them, honestly. They might be fun for some things, but they miss a lot of the BIOS settings you want. Now they have the important ones like slow mode and PCIe clock. So you have your bare minimum, you can overclock on them. I just don't like them and I wouldn't recommend them. Anyways, let's continue. Is there anything left here? Supermicro. That's server stuff. Don't buy server stuff for overclocking. Tyan. Zotac. Okay, it seems like that's about it. Let's full screen this. Yeah, let's leave on this amazing little board here. Now, this and the Rampage 3 Black are basically the holy grail of X58. This is... oh, great. Can we get this in better resolution? No, we can't. I should have made a picture myself. Anyways, those are basically your holy grails, and unlike with 775, in my opinion, there is two of them this time. Now, I still like the ASUS board a bit better, but there can be arguments made for the Gigabyte board being better. However, again, I prefer ASUS on, unfortunately, most platforms. Makes me look like ASUS shield probably. Anyways. So that's X58 for you. Really fun platform. I recommend you try it. For starters, my recommendations go to the Rampage 2 Extreme. So this little one in the original Rampage design. It's usually pretty available and relatively cheap. Again, don't spend tons of money on Rampage 2s. Wait for one to come along. They are pretty common. If you can't get or don't want to get a ROG board, my recommendation would be either the P6 X58D or again, I'm talking boards that you can reasonably buy. Not stuff you have to search for a lot. So these are also pretty common. Or the Gigabyte board. Gigabyte X58A UD7. That's also an option of like non-extreme overclocking focused boards that are really good. So this one or the P6 X58D. Anyways, let's leave on this one. I hope this helped you and prevented you from buying some, I don't know, the third DFI to test if DFI was any good later than AMD, AM2 or stuff like that. Hope you could find something that you might enjoy, and bye bye.